So, as Janet said, I kind of got asked to do this at the last minute. And as many of you know, we different gardening group had a plant sale last weekend. So my time into this is a little bit sparse. So bear with me. And yeah, we can look at the pretty pictures. Okay, so propagation methods are they're sexual or they're vegetative. And sexual propagation is through seeding. And one thing that is good about that is it mixes up the genome. In vegetative, on the other hand, just kind of keeps the same old thing rolling along. But it's sometimes easier. Now, to start with everything, label everything with the name and date. I am really bad about this. I am so thankful that Leslie Hauser is with me on so much of what I do because she's really good about it. So I don't know if Leslie's on here or not. Thank you, Leslie. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to start with seeding. And this is kind of a repeat to anybody who heard me and Jennifer speak about 2 years ago for this group and then also at mini college. So anyway, germination. It's the development of a plant from a seed or spore after a period of dormancy. And then every species of plant has one or more mechanisms for delaying germination until the seed is dispersed. Norman Dino. Norman Dino was actually a chemist, but he was all about what it was going to take to germinate plants. And I think he kind of did a citizen science sort of deal all across the country and got lots of people to help him put together a fairly fabulous publication that you can find online easily. Oops, how did I do that again? Yep, I guess so. I was hitting the... Okay, so seeds fall into one of two categories. Quiescent ones have just a very short period of time before the mechanism that delays them is destroyed, and it's just drying out briefly, and annual seeds do that. Dormant seeds have a more extended and complicated mechanism. So dormancy is maintained through either physical, external type inhibitors like the hard seed coat or waxy coatings like that, and chemical inhibitors are internal, and some seeds will do both things. So physical inhibitors are removed by scarification or scarification, however you want to say it. So mechanical means like nicking a seed coat. And then there's hot water, and someone asked me about that today, thought that was a bizarre thing. And it does feel really weird to boil up some water and pour it on your seeds. Just doesn't seem like that's a living thing to do. But things like lupin and baptisia, which isn't native, but nonetheless, you boil the water, you let it sit a minute or two, not like come to room temperature or anything. You leave it hot, seriously hot. Pour it in the bowl with your seeds and let them sit for 24 hours. Let them come to room temperature and sit there. And then another way of doing this is something chemical like sulfuric acid. And I really don't recommend that. Screwing around with sulfuric acid. So something that these things are doing here to some degree is replicating passage through an animal's gut. Heating them up and blasting them with some chemicals and all that kind of stuff, and that's the seeds that can withstand an animal's gut get dispersed off someplace better than the ones that just get shot out of their seed pod. So that's where that went. Okay, so there's some examples. We kind of went with the lupin seeds, which are on the purple picture there, doing that because lupin seeds, relatively speaking, are big seeds, but they're still darn little. So, you're holding this thing, and I managed to squirt it out and ping them all over my kitchen a few times. And then you're trying to scratch them, and that usually does in your fingernails more than it does the seed. Or you're putting a razor blade So this water thing in the, poured over them just seemed to be safer, and it worked just as well. And it's what we do now. Oh, then the next thing are chemical inhibitors. And then that's what we call stratification. So temperature manipulation is the most common thing, and that's kind of what we do for the plant sale propagation stuff. Light exposure is just something you have to note whenever whatever plant is coming up. You need to, I Google them, name of the plant, propagation, and see what it says, whether they need light exposure or not. And there's also books that will tell you those sorts of things as well. Removing the fruit covering, there are some chemicals within the fruit that will affect the seed and keep it from germinating until that fruit has sloughed off. And then there's this exposing seed to gibberellic acid, which is another one of those things that's beyond me. I mean, I understand it and everything, but it's just not something I'm going to do. So temperature stratification is common for our native perennials. And like I say, it's basically mimicking our winter. They need to have a certain amount of time under 40 degrees to feel like they've been through winter and now they can germinate. Some of them also want some warm, moist time, and today would be a prime example of that. It was actually pretty warm today. So a bunch of seeds that they're ripe, so to speak, they go through our fall, and it's warm and wet for a period of time. I mean, this year it's going to be kind of like September and October maybe. And so they want to feel that warm wet before they get the cold wet, so that they really feel like they've had the full experience. And so then this lasting for years. Okay, so folks at home, I don't know if you can, they can't see it. Okay. Can they see my face? No. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, what I'm holding is a baggie that has Trillium ovatum seeds in it. They're something that generally takes 2 winters to germinate, which means they live here in the bag for 2 years, kind of thing. I read up on you're supposed to be able to fool them. So as soon as I took them out of the pod, I threw them in here, put them in my refrigerator for 2 months. I took them out just last week, and I'm going to leave them out in a warm place in my house for 2 more months. And then I'll take them into the PHS greenhouse and we'll plant them in pots, and they can finish out their second winter and hopefully germinate in the spring. Trillium ovatum, which is the, pretty. Now the other trillium that's native right here locally is considered precocious, and it will germinate with only 1 winter under its belt. So precocious. Most trilliums take 2 winters. So right. Well, and then like false Solomon seal, I planted some seeds of those a year and a half ago, and I think it was well, now maybe like 2 years now. So early this summer, some flat, I know you guys had all been looking at that junk Lisa had sitting there. Can we get rid of this? And it's like suddenly the myanthemum germinated, 18 months later. So as I showed you, to the degree that you can see this, my seeds are inside a quartered coffee filter. Oftentimes you see people put them in paper towels, and what I read somewhere in that, sometimes as you're stratifying them, they will go ahead and germinate towards the end of their stratification period. So now you've got roots in here, and if they have strong hair roots, they either embed in the paper towel, so now you're ripping your paper towel and everything all apart, or you simply rip the hair roots off as you remove them out. And apparently they don't do that so much with the coffee filter. So why use a coffee filter? You can also pre-plant them in a pot. I personally don't have enough room in my refrigerator for that. label. And then there's the natural method of just going ahead and like planting them in a pot and letting them sit out the winter like they would normally. And that's more or less what we're attempting to do in the PHS greenhouse. It's unheated. Let's go on. Oh, there's my pictures of ready for the fridge, labeled. Here's an example of ones that are sitting outside. Jennifer provided these pictures to me, and notice the cage she put over them. Kind of important because squirrels and blue jays think this nice soft soil is the perfect place to put that walnut or that filbert, and they will just make a mess. So, okay. Yeah. So anyway, here's what we do. And keep in mind, as I talk about some of this, we share that greenhouse at PHS with the veggie group. And as we get it for the winter, then we kind of have to transition out as they're transitioning in. So, you know, if some of this sounds funny, like, why on earth are you moving the plants around so much? That's why. So we start with clean flats or new pots and fresh, new bagged seedling mix. Around mid-November, we're going to start planting the ones that need the longest stratification. And we'll put most of them in these 72 cell flats. That's one size up bigger than the veggie group uses. 128, I think, so they use. I don't know. Then we put them on the floor in the unheated greenhouse. Okay, so we're doing that because there's less light underneath the green or the bench, but it's also less temperature fluctuation down there on the floor than it is higher up in the greenhouse, because on a sunny day, even an unheated greenhouse, and that one's a big one with a lot of airspace in it, it can still get pretty warm in there. Now, the one downside to that business is we have had rats. They've only really damaged, I had a whole lot of little lily bulblets that I got from Sandy Piper, and the rats just charged in there and scarfed them down. And then that meant they kind of ran around on everything else and pooped on it. And that was, but I don't think that they ate any other seeds. But I also set traps. They paid. Okay, then after we get them, we put the lightest, filmiest plastic on top to keep the soil moisture up. You can buy it in the paint section at Home Depot by roll, and it's kind of comparable to dry cleaner bag weight, maybe slightly heavier, but something, yeah. Okay, then once they start to germinate, we put them up on the bench. Okay. And we continue to cover them to keep that soil moisture up. And that film is light enough that even little itty bitty newly germinated seedlings aren't smushed down. Okay. Now, this is Jennifer's slide here, and it's true for us too. After 2 or 3 true leaves are formed, we transplant them into bigger pots. You don't want to let them get root bound, which they can, if they're growing, do pretty fast in a little tiny cell. She had a different comment about adding fertilizer, because obviously what tomato wants when it starts moving into a 4-inch pot is a lot different than what a native plant wants. They have much less requirement for fertilizer. In fact, just the new potting mix provides quite a bit of nutrition to them that early on. Okay, and here's a picture of what it looks like with Marge watering. Where's Marge? Marge is the star of my picture. You can see in the picture down on the floor, bulging out the plastic, there's still some flats that are down there. I just didn't have, I didn't know I was going to be doing this talk, and I didn't take good enough pictures. So I'll work on it next spring. All righty. So then as we start to transition them, I mean, the good thing about natives is they are native here, so they can take our weather. But just the same, we would like to transition them out. So first we put them back down on the floor, but they're in 4-inch pots now. They're pretty big. Put them down on the floor right next to the door, to the back door where it's maybe a little drafty. They spend a week there, and then they go out and they spend a week kind of under the hoop house, which gives them a little bit of protection. And this is actually our hoop house from 2 years back. We improved on it a lot last year. The only thing that we had get damaged were perennials, ornamentals, not native, none of the native plants, even though they experienced, even in that just little flimsy hoop house there, they experienced some definite frosts and were fine. And then out of the hoop house, because we need room in the hoop house for the perennials, they go just straight on the ground out back, and you see some native flax sitting there, and it's got a bunch of grass behind it, but the grass beside it is grass that we grew. It's a native grass. The other stuff I'm sure is not native. Okay. Where do you get seeds? Well, commercial seed companies. Somebody today commented that Chenard's is carrying Steel Acres seeds. Willamette Wildlings is probably our favorite. They give us, I think the quantity that you get in the package is a little bit less than it is in some other seed companies, but then they charge you less. What we get is always enough for our use, and we probably seed at a higher rate than the average home gardener does. So anyway, I'm happy with that. But I mean, I've also gotten some from Steel Acres and Northwest Meadowscapes, and I think we also get some from Klamath Siskiyou, and there's lots of places. And, you know, not everybody carries everything. So then the other option is that you collect your own. This is when you collect your own, you know, ornamental perennials out of your yard, you don't know who cross-pollinated them, and you can't always guarantee they're going to come out like you're expecting them to. But the natives, this is a species that's developed to pollinate with its own. You don't very often get a hybrid. So you'll know what you get. So collecting your own is a pretty safe deal. If you plan ahead, you should go out and bag your seed pods. These cute little bags. So these are Iris 10X seed pods, because they, yes, it's organza. Is that what you call it? Yeah. Anyway, yes, because the silly seed pods, you can look at them and look at them, but the day that you don't go look at them, they will pop open and spread their seeds all over, and then a mouse will carry them off. Anyway, bag your seed pods. So when you go collecting, if you do it on your own place, that's fine. Do whatever you want. If you go to somebody else's, you should ask permission first. Yeah, and I admit I took Nephofia seeds off of a seed head dangling over the sidewalk in Ashland, Oregon. So get permission, or not, or do it fast. I didn't say that.
Did they germinate?
Yeah, they did. They did. Don't have a clue what they looked like. Okay, so then going into the national or state forest, the national forest has a procedure where you go in, you pay a fee, you get a permit. I don't know that they'll tell you where to go to get seeds. If you were to go in and dig plants, they may well tell you, go down this particular road and you can only dig within so many feet of the road. And now the state forest, I actually called Tillamook and one of the other ones close by to ask them about what kind of permission I needed to go collect seeds. Both offices went, huh? You want to, nobody's asked us that before, kind of was their reaction. So I think just do it on state forests. I mean, they more or less told me that because they didn't know. So then you get your seeds. What do you do? So seed preparation, you know, you need to get the chaff off. and you can usually pop them out of their pods, or you grind it up and you sift it out. And when it gets down to having fine stuff, I kind of roll them around on a paper plate that's got a shiny coat on it, and the chaff seems to kind of electrostatically stick, and the seeds are usually heavier and will roll down to the bottom. So I find that pretty easy to clean them. I also have a microscope, and I check things with a microscope from time to time. If seeds are super duper tiny, sometimes they're not the seeds. I've had that happen where I probably had infertile seeds, and I wouldn't have been able to tell that without looking at them under the microscope. So that helps. Then for seed storage, I think the coolest thing are these little glassine envelopes. I think that's the right word. I don't have any of those. And I had been putting them in these nifty plastic bags that I got at the dollar store. But people last year were telling me static electricity was making the seeds stick inside, and it was difficult to get them out, and then where people were shaking them out, they were spilling them around. So I have gone to putting them in folded up paper and then stick them in there. Long-term storage, it's kind of a good idea to put them in the refrigerator. And it's even, I think, temperature-wise, even better to put them in the wine cooler, but my husband says no. Okay, there is a seed packet from Willamette Wildlings, and they are great in that you see right there, it says stratification, long, 12 weeks. I love it when they give you that information. And not all of them do. In fact, from some of the big seed companies, you'll still get a native plant from time to time, and they basically say plant 1/8 of an inch deep. Well, when it really needed to be stratified, 1/8 of an inch deep. And, they don't always give you that. That's one thing that buying, focused native seed company seeds, it's really helpful. Okay. So Norman Dino there, his seed germination thing, you can find it online just by Googling that. This other reference that I had there was from last year, and it was really kind of aimed at vegetables, but he had good stuff too. This is kind of in the middle of it, because that was the end of the seeding part.
Now people online can't hear you.
Okay. So here are 3 great books. Many of you might have the purple American Horticulture Society plant propagation book. Tons and tons of information, really great pictures. Anybody who has it really likes it.
We'll show those online.
Okay. Then here's another one, Propagation of Pacific Northwest Native Plants. Only addresses natives. What it doesn't do is give you that many. For instance, something that's missing out of here, which kind of surprised me, Ribes sanguineum. They don't talk about that in here. How did they not talk about that? And then here's another little book that I believe was used in some horticulture book. Oh, red flowering currant. Okay, so this one is Propagation Handbook, Basic Techniques for Gardeners by Jeff Bryant. And it, for being a little book, has tons of tables of how best to do things. Although it's all things, it's not native plants. This is called Propagation Handbook, Basic Techniques for Gardeners by Jeff Bryant. And I don't know that it's printed anymore, but I got it online through Thrift Books. Okay, here we go. So vegetative propagation. So I thought I needed to say something about division, even though we've got one official dig and divide, and we have a BYOP, bring your own plant, left to go, and then we're out of the division business. So here's a guy using a shovel. Here's somebody using 2 forks, and then there's our beloved reciprocating saw on the bottom. It's after you manage to rip that giant whatever out and you cannot pull it into pieces, then you get out the sawzall and go for it.
Iron plant. Oh, for bamboo.
Yeah.
We're doing this tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Bean soup at Nellie's, 11 o'clock. bring your dividing forks. Okay. So, of the different forms of vegetative propagation, plantlets is one of them. And I thought, what could that be? What could that be? And then I remembered the piggyback plant, and I actually have a couple of them, and they had babies just sitting there on the leaves. So aren't those cute? Strawberries also put off plantlets, as we know. Now, most of the time, if your strawberry is growing in the ground, that makes it no longer available to us for the plant sale because the babies will have rooted into the dirt. But yeah, you can do it yourself for sure. And if the strawberries were in a raised container where they were dangling off the side, then the babies would be best practices for us. And if anybody can think of other natives to add in here that produce little plantlets like this, let me know. Okay. And then there's this air layering thing. And I mostly brought that up because I bought one of these. I'm going to use it one day. It's this clamshell that you will put around a branch and see if you can get it to air layer in there. I'm not so sure, but what the saran wrap isn't a better source, because with the saran wrap, you can see the roots that have formed. I'm going to have to open this silly black solid thing up every time.
And then you can see when the material around it needs to be watered.
Point.
What type of plants would you for that one?
Many woody things. And you know, this side, the simple layering to the side, I have gotten 2 trees off of I have one of those hybrid Eddie White Wonder dogwood trees. I made 2 trees off of it doing that.
I've got a rhododendron.
Yeah, rhododendrons and azaleas to do the.
You do in the ground or you do on the ground? I do on the ground, but I leave them in the ground for at least a year. So you peg them and put soil over them. Let the people know what they're saying.
Okay, the discussion is what else that people have actually done the air layering on, and figs came up and rhododendrons, azaleas. I bet hydrangeas would do it too. Yeah. Oh, you've done it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, Oregon grape. Oregon grape. Beauty berry.
Somebody said a plant name, I think.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Beauty berry.
Beauty berry.
Layering in the ground is important to wound the bark where it touches the sand.
Right, and you see in the air layer one, they've completely removed the bark on part of it. The part that would go in the ground, I don't know that you do such extensive bark removal, but if you just scraped it up a bit and put some rooting hormone on it. So, then two other plant parts that you can do vegetative propagation off are the roots, and we have done Asclepia speciosa, the showy milkweed, by roots that we purchased from Seven Oaks. And I couldn't find another one, not native. I can find lots of other plants that I'm aware of that propagate well from root cuttings. But then I saw something that said anything that suckers, and there just must be something there that suckers that, that we'd be able to. Anyway, so then moving on to leaves, that one baffled me too. Joke was Himalayan blackberries. Yeah, not native. So when it came down to leaves, sedums come up, and I think, and I found a reference for saxifrage. But also, when you think about leaves, you think about what? Begonias, African violets. They're not native. So then we get to stems, and that's really where this was going. Stems. We propagate a lot of the natives that we have out at PHS by stems. Okay, so to do that, start with clean clippers and make a label. So for medium, if you read most of the books, everybody's got a different mix of what they want to stick their sticks into. Kind of something that's 50-50, like perlite, that would be, help with drainage, but then have something like peat or coir that will retain some moisture in there. Kind of is standard. We just use our own potting mix. That we get from U&D, and that we, I think, request to have a little extra compost mixed into it. So the other thing that's really important on these cuttings is to have some way of holding in the humidity to keep the soil moisture up. We are using a mist chamber out at CHS, but there's some things you can do at home as well. The reason that's all important, especially it's important for perennials early in the summer, is that they can't take up much water. They can take up a little bit of water, but not really much. But if they get hot, they open the stomata on the leaves and transpire all of their moisture away, and they'll dry right up. So if we keep them in a environment where it's cooler and the humidity's up, they won't open up those stomata, and it'll keep that cutting alive long enough to grow roots, we hope. So, and then there's rooting hormone, powder, liquid, or none. Powder, liquid with its little dilution cup here, or none. Christina doesn't use anything, I believe. Oh, never. Leslie and I are kind of the, why not? We'll give it a whirl. It's best to take cuttings first thing in the morning. And if you can't do that, you should try real hard to keep them hydrated and cool, like put them in a cooler, make sure you squirt water on them, and so on and so forth. So it's real common, especially with woody plants, to take a 3 to 4 node cutting. You're going to take everything off of the bottom 2 nodes and stick that down in the medium. If you leave leaves on the upper one, I mean, most of the time you're taking woody plants this time of year, they're about to drop those leaves, but you can still leave the leaves on. If they have really big, soft leaves, you might want to cut them in half, because that's just a hydration drain on the cutting. If they are evergreen, you might want to leave that leaf on there, because otherwise you're going to have this really ugly stick when it finally roots. I've had this discussion with Christina. Okay, so for home use, since you don't have the PHS greenhouse to back you up, a forsyth pot is a useful thing, and I'll show you a picture, but I'll also show you kind of what it is. It's one of these big flat, everybody seen these before? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then it has a clay pot. Has to be clay, not plastic, that's plugged up. This one's not, but has to be plugged up, and then fill it with vermiculite. Keep that full of water, and it will ooze water out to your seedlings. So it's also good at home to have this like in a big plastic bag or something. And you could actually, this one is not one of the hanging basket ones, so I couldn't hook this on. but have some kind of a little wire support to keep the plastic a little bit off the plants. If you only have a little, couple cuttings, get a little pot, stick this on top. It's just, I don't know what was in that. Some sort of soda was in it. Got a hole in the top that you can leave open, so there is some aeration. That's kind of useful too. Okay, so it's a wide flat.
Explain that you're.
I'm redoing the four-side pot. Okay, wide flat. You put a clay pot, and no, you plug up the hole, and then you put vermiculite, and then you put your sticks in there, and you keep this full of water. And it's even better for them if you can kind of put something around it. Yeah, dome. Okay, moving on. Okay, and there's the pictures. And the other thing I have here are alcohol cleaning wipes. If you're out in the field and don't have a way to sanitize your clippers, you can wipe them off with a alcohol cleaning wipe. Okay, so our woody natives are most commonly taken in the fall and the winter on the hardened new wood. And it's kind of dark in here. I brought a big chunk of my crazy righties to show you 2 years back wood and last year's wood, because I didn't prune this thing when I was supposed to. So it's 2 different times of pruning this. If you want to prune it for the best blossoms, I should have pruned it in the spring. But to prune it for the best strike rate on cuttings for new plants, this is the time. So afterwards, if anybody wants to look at this, you're welcome. I will point it out to you. They say the best cuttings are about the size of a pencil, diameter-wise. Now, herbaceous perennial natives are usually taken in the spring, and they strike best off of shoots that have not yet formed their flower buds. You go ahead and you take the stem tip. The plant will then branch lower down and continue to grow. You won't cause it to not bloom if you do it in the spring. You might only take 3 nodes. You see smaller cuttings on the herbaceous plants. And especially you see part of the leaves cut off oftentimes. They really, even more than the woody plant. I mean, the woody plants, you could leave them sitting out all winter long outside here and they would be fine. The herbaceous perennials that have been cut in the spring are going into summer. They really need to have their mist chamber or something that's going to keep them from wilting. Okay, there's a picture. I actually have one cut. Pass around if y'all want to see it. Okay, so one of the things we do here.
Could you just define for us what you mean by strike rate? Success rate?
Yes, success rate. How many of them actually grow roots? So, right. So what I've done there, you see that the bottom edge is slanted and the top is cut across. That does 2 things. It tells you which is up and which is down. And it's really important that you stick them in right, because if you stick them in upside down, they will not root. Good try, Jet. But also that pointy end on a woody plant makes them just slide right into the medium pretty well too. So that's good. Rooting hormone, little dabble do you. I know before I was a master gardener and anybody told me differently, I would take my whatever cutting, stick it in my little jar and go and end up with probably 2 inches of the bottom of my stem coated in rooting hormone. And that might have decreased the likelihood of it actually producing roots. Too much rooting hormone can cause them to just form a callus that doesn't turn into roots very well. So anyway, just a little dab will do you. And you see in the bottom there, I've just barely touched it. It's not up the side of the stem at all. So there they are, all properly stuck in their pot with a label. I've had too many pots where it's like, oh, wonder what this is going to be. It's a mystery at my house. So
I will say the foresight pot, because I had the foresight pot at my house last year,
Mhm.
and they propagated really well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all I had to do was, I mean, I was around enough to make sure they had water, and my greenhouse is not heated, and they were fine.
yeah, it's kind of
Why
a
don't you pass that on to them, what Sue said.
Oh, Susan is saying that she babysat the forsyth pots for the
There was a number of things.
number of things,
There were
conifers
I would say woody
and woody
shrubs.
shrubs in the forsyth pots, and they were easy to take care of, and a lot of them rooted. They did really well. So here's an example of a forsyth pot, and this is penstemon, and of course this is almost cheating because penstemons just do roots. But you can see how the plants, and I put a lot of plants in there too, but they were penstemons. And you can see what fabulous roots came out of that. I mean, those are it's the same pot. I didn't go find a plant that had especially good roots and show it. That came out of that pot. Okay. Now, and plants can trick you. Okay, the pot, I stuck salal in there in July of this summer. And, it sat around and I didn't water it terrifically. I should have taken it out to PHS where it had been in the mist chamber. It dropped its leaves. Oh, and then it put out all this great new growth here in the fall. And I thought, oh, they're rooting. There's not a root in that pot. They will trick you. Now, the ones on the other tray, and you see two, I pulled two out, and they have great roots stuck on the bottom of them. They are a year old. They're from summer of 2022. So, anyway. Sometimes it does. I mean, some plants are more difficult than others, and I think salal is one of them. Quite frankly, Oregon grape's a little difficult. And it seems like it shouldn't be, but there's a few things that I know this year we're going to try growing them from seed. Ironically, you'd say elderberry. Got to be better from a stick than it would be from a seed. I happen to be in a weird place near an elderberry bush when a utility truck went by and just ravaged the plant and left all manner of berries on the ground. I picked one up, or a cluster of them up, and we planted them. And they're already, I mean, this was last spring, they're already in gallon pots now.
Oh.
And a few years back, Christina grew Ribes aureum from seed at the same time I grew a bunch from sticks. And while I had a bigger plant sooner, by the time they were ready, but it didn't look good, it was a stick, By the time they were ready to go to sale, which was about 18 months in that case, they were about equal. So some of these woody plants might do better from seed than we think. So I'm going to try salal from seed. I've got some cascara seeds. And huckleberry, which doesn't always strike terrifically. Evergreen huckleberry, but is very popular, obviously. So I'm kind of at the end of my steam here. So if anybody has a question.
What I thought I would do is get out of your presentation and then show the things to the people at home. So
okay.
Covers of the books. People. When I'm Zoomers, I'm going to
quit screen sharing because I'm going to show you some of the things that Lisa was showing us, and then we'll go through any questions that you might have. Hang on here.
Lisa,
Let me
you
get the
pretty much
lights.
self-taught because the requirements of doing master gardeners and making sure we had plants, you just have learned this stuff by researching. And
Yes and no. I mean, I had my first wildflower garden when I was 12 years old. It was at my parents' house. I mean, and we always had family land. We would dig up anything you wanted out there. I remember it was spring when I was 12 years old. I dug up a trillium. I took it home. I planted it at my parents' house. It got bigger. And before my parents left that house,
So they could hear you.
I dug it up. It's in my yard right now. Like that clump of trillium. So anyway, so yes, I've been into native plants for a long time. I went off to college thinking I was going to do forest ecology. And then I switched and went into fisheries, but anyway. So yeah, I mostly am self-taught. I mean, I took horticulture in school, but not specifically. So
thank you. For all
Sure.
your effort.
yeah. So Becky, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
And we'll repeat them.
I noticed that when you're putting things in PHS in the beginning, you're not necessarily thinking about them getting in sun. You put them under, you keep them cool, not necessarily in the dark, but I do.
Yeah.
So they're underneath the thing.
So-
the bench.
So
And with that filmy plastic.
Mhm.
So
try to
I'm trying to
rephrase that.
translate this into what a person could do at home. Because that's the point, right? And so I'm going to be putting mine on in this sort of a shady area. I already messed with squirrels. I gotta get that figured out. But it's out. I noticed that it could be the woody things could be out in the
Becky's asking about plants being held under the benches in kind of a darker spot. She's wondering how to translate that to her yard.
Yeah. So when I'm
This is at
putting in
PHS.
let's say would maybe just out in anything.
Oh, yes.
And they don't.
Yes, I mean, now you're talking about
I'm talking about woody.
cuttings. Well, Susan had all those foresight. They were just,
Sort of like, but that's greenhouse. I'm talking outside.
but it's unheated. At that
Well,
point, the
but it has no
greenhouse,
weather
a
on
lot of what the greenhouse does is keep the critters from
Right.
getting into it.
And weather. It needs attention.
Well, the blowing, but
I mean, there's a variety of things.
So,
that
but
you have
that's
to
what
do.
they're,
a lot of people I know who have done it, like Bart Bulmer, he just did it right under the plant.
yeah.
The plant.
Another plant.
Yeah.
Another
Mhm.
plant. he just
Yeah.
did that, And they kind of protected it, you know.
So now the downside
Oh,
to
you're gonna dig
setting, yeah, this is for your personal use. You can do whatever you want with your plants.
No, but
If you're growing them for us, that means they're not best practices.
And I want to do that practice. We'll start with that. And
Mhm.
that works all the way around. Right?
Mhm.
And that's why I wanted to just, the plastic over for hardwood cuttings or not. Correct?
Keep in mind that, so when we were putting plastic over, we were keeping moisture in. If you set them outside and you put heavier plastic over cuttings, you may be keeping moisture out, especially if they're sitting on concrete or something like that. I think no plastic would be fine.
And then, I think I asked you about the couple of stones I told at that meeting, but, sand. How about sand?
Well, like I said,
So next uses sand at OSU at, you know, Nick is,
so there's,
Yeah, he's got,
she's asking about having sand in your medium.
and they've got every kind of cutting in.
Ye-
Sand bed.
in a sand bed, and nothing over it. They're usually heated. Sand bed.
Yeah.
It's not just something
Hmm.
out. It is out in the, it's no. It's
Is it out in the weather?
It is out in the weather. It is right next to a building.
If you go researching that, you're gonna find every combination
Okay.
of perlite sand,
Yeah.
vermiculite, compost,
Yeah,
this.
it's just basic.
It's gonna be most anything, which is why we just kind of like went, this is just the potting soil. And our potting soil, if you look at it, has a lot of, I think, sand in it. It's good, well draining potting soil. So, okay,
Okay.
Kathy.
I've had good luck propagating woody cuttings, putting them under gutters. Because that protects them from heavy rains and it protects them from the winds and it gives them a little bit of warmth. And I just stick them under there and, if I put them on a raised thing, then they're still be.
So Kathy is saying she likes to put her woody sticks underneath a Douglas fir on top of a concrete block or something, get them up off the ground and to give them some protection from the winter. Yeah. Brenda.
Lisa, do you have any suggestions for plants or specifically seeds that like will germinate? These are so easy. You can't mess them up. Cause like I've done lupins and you get some that do.
Yeah, lupins aren't as easy.
Monkey flower is one thing was crazy and it germinated all over.
Yes.
But if you have any suggestions for ones that really germinate good?
Question is,
So the question is, what is a plant that you can grow that will for sure grow? And monkey flower, well, it's not, it's erythranthe is the technical genus. Popcorn flower, the annuals, and I didn't address the annuals here because most of the annuals do just grow like crazy. The Clarkia and Gilia and Collinsia and Colomia. All of those will grow really well. If I have to think hard on, we had a lot of perennials that grew terrifically too. Some of the penstemons, and penstemons grow really well. I brought a penstemon tonight because I didn't know if I'd be able to show it. Penstemons are great in that they tend to have adventitious, I think is the word, roots. And so like this penstemon came from Joyce's house and it was climbing down off of a concrete wall. So this thing's been dangling out in the air all summer long. And it's been thinking, I need to root myself someplace. And so there's little nubs on the bottom of that. Cardwellii. Penstemon Cardwellii. So it's very
near the camera.
Oh. Penstemon Cardwellii. And I just stuck these last week, so there's not anything to be expected yet. But I know I made a mess. And it had, you could see, okay, right there. Let's see, can you see the bump there on the end? It's right there against the white. That's an adventitious root. So it's ahead of the game already. It's already got a root going. Oh. And I don't know where the rest of that fell. If somebody wants to put that on the raffle table, can, but it's not officially rooted yet. And it's not labeled either. Okay, so.
any other questions in the audience, and I'll check this.
Yeah. Oh, that's our stories. Okay. Okay, a list of seed sources to the update. Sure. Seed sources. Yes, I have a list of where we can buy bare root stuff, but and I could throw that at you practically right now, but I'll get the seed sources together. Okay. That seems to be the only question. Okay. Oh, yeah. And show the book.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's that propagation handbook. Is it Techniques by Jeff Bryant? And I think I've heard that that was used as a classroom book at some class at LBCC for a bunch of years. Then there's this one. Oops. Which is wonderful information for the plants they include in it, but they don't include everything in it, in my opinion. And then there's the old purple plant propagation book by, what's his name? Toogood, Alan Toogood.
Oh.
I think that it's still in print, but I don't think the new ones are purple.
Oh.
I don't know. We got a lot of purple people in this group.
Okay. Zoomy people, I'm pretty much, I think we're done. But before I do anything, we're gonna stop the recording, because if this recorded correctly, properly, we will get it posted on our Benton County website, so you can watch it again. Oh, there's one thing, Lisa, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I have done research on this kind of stuff. It deteriorates over time, and I remember asking someone at a local nursery, and I won't say who I spoke to or which nursery, but it was news to that person. And so the last time I bought a container of this, I dated it, wrote it on there in felt tip pen, so that after whatever number of years it is, then I'll discard this.
So yeah, I buy a new one probably every year. The liquid lasts longer because it's not actually in water, it's in an alcohol. And so that's another reason you don't stick your cutting in there, because you introduce some moisture to it, and that moisture messes it up right away. So always pour a little dab out onto a paper plate or onto whatever you have handy. Don't stick your cutting back into the bottle.
Yep. Okay.
Whatever you dump out that.
Oh, good point.
Oh,
And don't put
yes.
leftovers back.
And in fact, using the powder, and I don't remember if Lisa said this specifically, don't stick your stem in the bottle, in the container, because you could be introducing something bad into that product. And then the same with the liquid. Don't pour any unused liquid back into the container. Okay, let me see if I can stop this recording. Are you sure you want to? Yes.